Well, hello everybody, and welcome to another episode of Derp Your Hooves. So this is actually taking off and landing in the Bell 407, tutorial number 2. Again, I'm just showing you guys that I use a Hooves stick and throttle and some rudder pedals to fly the helicopters in Microsoft Flight Simulator 2020, and that's the setup that we're going to be using for these tutorial videos. You don't necessarily have to purchase the X56, which I have, as long as you have a good set of rudder pedals and a nice stick and throttle. It'll make this tutorial easier for you. And I know that I've mainly geared this for PC users, but if you're an Xbox user using a gamepad, I mean, you can adapt. The principles are the same. So this is just the basic introduction, and the video is going to begin right now. Okay, so now that we've got the basic setup for our controls out of the way, and we know that we're using the rudder pedals, the stick, and a throttle, let's hop into the cockpit. So I'm just going to pan with my mouse. So again, I just kind of wanted to cover, we're flying helicopters, and if you watch the first lesson, I kind of already went over this, where you have your rudder pedals that are going to basically help you turn in direction. They'll help you spin the helicopter at low speeds, low RPM. You have your stick, so nose up, or nose up, nose down. Oh, see, it's already bouncing around. And then you have your collective. So there was one thing I didn't cover in the last one, which was trim. I didn't really play with the trim, and we're going to cover that today. And that's actually going to be right here. We have set our trim, and I can basically show you how to do that in another video, or at the end. I'll bring up a slide that we've set our pitch trim, and it's going to be important. So you know what, let's just go over it really quick. So if I go into control options and I go into my stick, so here we have our longitudinal trim, lateral trim, longitudinal trim, lateral trim. So it's going to be on the hat switch. I have it basically set up so up, down, left, right. And you're going to see how this plays in, but I basically just assigned all of this to the hat switch, which is right here, button 10, which is also 9, 8, and 7, because it shows you right there that it's 4 directions. So there's 4 directions, and when I assigned it to the hat switch, so you want to set your trim before you start this, assuming that you have a trim. So you want these 4 settings: the increase, longitudinal, and the lateral increase, and then the decrease for both of them. And you want to have them be opposites. And I've pretty much set them up like I said. Increase is up. Increase lateral is to the right. Decrease lateral is down, or longitudinal is down, and decrease lateral is left. And so I'll show you why. So let's go back. You're going to see it as we take off. So that's going to be the hat switch right here, the yaw, pitch, and trim. So there's something else that I want to cover, which is, someone had mentioned, yes, we have a collective and you just don't cut the throttle. And I had mentioned earlier in the tutorials that when I push up on my throttle, it pulls up on the collective. So when I push forward on my regular throttle, the collective goes up, because that's pretty much how the sim interprets my throttle. So occasionally I say things like give it more gas, give it more throttle, and I mean pull up on the collective. Now on the collective itself, you have a throttle setting where you can control your throttle, and I would imagine you can map a button to it. But for us, I mean, honestly, you can set this to something else on your stick, and I can just put it at 94, 95 max. I'm going to leave it. And the throttle settings are important, but we're going to just kind of do it this way. So now that we've gotten all that out of the way, and hopefully we didn't waste too much of your time. We're at Van Nuys Airport, and I'm not going to bother calling things in on the tower, but I am going to take off, and I already showed you the basic takeoff and landing. So what you want to do, like I said in the previous videos, you want to get comfortable by just giving it a little bit of gas, which would be pulling up on the collective, which in my case is giving it some throttle, and the helicopter comes up, and then I just gently release and come down, and that's kind of a rough landing. But like I said, you just want to do little hops. So what you would like to do, now ideally this is a little more advanced than the takeoff and landing, so please watch my takeoff and landing video, and like I said, practice this until you get sick of it. Because when you fly helicopters, if you finally got used to flying airplanes, helicopters are completely different. They're a different beast altogether. So let's go ahead and let's taxi by just giving it a little bit of throttle. And yes, helicopters do sometimes have to taxi to the runway when they're at an airport. It's usually procedure, so you just give it a little bit of throttle to keep it off the ground, and you nose it down, and we're hardly even off the ground, and we're just going to nose it down, and we're going to crawl, give it a little bit more throttle, which would be pulling on the collective, until we get it. We're not so much in the run-up area, but right before the numbers. Yeah. Right here. So you just want to walk it forward. Right here. And pretty much when you start getting in the center, you want to use your rudder pedals and give it a little more throttle and rotate it so that it's straight. Because you're slightly off the ground and you really don't want to go too high. So forward a little more and then rotate it. And again, I'm doing this really slow, and see, it's going to start coming down when I rotate. I'm doing it really slow, but I'm lining it up kind of on the runway. And then I'm gently going to bring it down, and it's going to clunk unless I'm really gentle with it. And there we go. My pitch is actually off. That's why it's leaning to the left. So here we are on the runway. We're not taking off and landing on a helipad. We're doing it on the runway. And right now we are on runway, I think 36 left. Yeah, we're on 36 left. So what we're going to do is we're going to click on the right window, and then we're going to give it the view I want, and we're going to push the throttle forward, which would be pulling up on the collective in our case. So us putting the throttle forward gently is the same as pulling up on the collective. So I'm giving it a little bit more throttle, and I am pushing the nose down slightly because I want it to go forward. Now you see it's leaning to the left, so now I'm going to take my trim and I'm going to level it out a little bit. I'm going to try to. And I'm going to gently maneuver down the runway while adjusting my pitch. And I may have to work the pedals a little bit. Now, and you just kind of want to adjust your pitch, adjust the pedal, rotate, give it a little bit of right rudder, and just go down the runway. And as you adjust your pitch, it's going to pull to the left, so it may sag a little bit, and that's okay. It's not perfectly level, but it's close enough. I mean, because this is pretty much all you can do is play with the trim to level it out, and then it's going to fight with you. So, as it pulls in one way. And you want to practice this as we totally veer off the runway because our pitch is off. And, I mean, ideally you want to fly straight down the runway like you would in, like, I don't know, a 172. And so I'm off, and you just kind of want to get yourself back on. And you play with the trim a little bit. And the throttle. And this is part of not having an actual collective. And like I said, I haven't flown with one. And you get to the end of the runway, and you should actually just be increasing slightly in altitude. So keeping the nose down so that you go forward and gain some speed. But at the same time, just kind of increasing the throttle. Which would be the same as pulling up on the collective. And like I said, I'm pushing the nose down. And what this will do is this will get you off the runway. So you're saying, but why? Well, because there's other things like hovering that are going to be a little bit more advanced that you could do. And it kind of requires a whole coordinated movement, which we're not totally going to do today. We're just going to sit here. And we took off, we're past the runway, and by the way, we're not in live player mode, so there's no traffic to worry about coming in. If you're in live player mode, like as if you're in real life, clear the runway and clear the flight path. Get off the flight path so other people can land. But in this case, we're just doing some practice. So that wasn't the best takeoff from a runway. But that's in general what you want to do. You want to try and stay straight down the runway, which is right down there, and take off and try and go straight. So right now I'm pretty much hovering, more or less. And we're going to get into the whole trim. So you saw that I set some settings there, the rotor settings. So that's going to help tilting the helicopter to the left, tilting it to the right, nosing it down. Well, that's nosing it up. Nosing it down. And nosing it up. So you basically have a rotor pitch trim, and it helps you with your stability so you can do things like hover, which is really cool. Now, I had mentioned in my other video that there are other helicopters in Microsoft Flight Simulator 2020. They are third-party helicopters and not the gimbal or the gumball or whatever it is, which I haven't had the privilege of flying yet. And they don't really have this kind of pitch trim set up. One of them does, the R33 does. It has like a lateral. I think it has like a lateral. It has one of them. It has where you can pitch the nose up and down. You can actually set that as if you were flying like a regular aircraft. So this is more helicopter-y than some of the other ones that are out there right now that I've flown. And there are a handful of third-party helicopters, and they're lots of fun. I like to fly them too, but they don't fly like this, which is a little more realistic. So, and I'm not doing a tutorial on those, I'm doing it on this, but they fly much differently. So, trim. So your pitch trim, so it's important. So if you were going to say, I don't know, take off and land the proper way, and let's say you wanted to use the Sim's air traffic controller, then the Sim is going to assign you a runway like it would anything else, and it would say, you know, fly left downwind runway, what, 17? 16? 17, I think. And so like an airplane, you would fly down the proper runway, which is going to be, what, 17? Yeah, it's something like that, it's 17. And you'd slowly bring it in. See, I'm kind of doing it very lackadaisical, just to show you. And you'd bring it in a lot like you would anything else. You'd cut the throttle. And you'd come down. And right now I'm doing like 70 knots, so I'm just hovering over the runway. I mean, I'm just kind of flying over it. I'm not really hovering over it. And I can adjust my trim. I can use Microsoft's, which I don't like. And you can play with your pitch trim and your rudder pedals, and it's going to rock back and forth. So I'm really just giving you basic tutorials. I'm not teaching you how to master the helicopter. I'm teaching you the basics of how to fly it, because a lot of people, I remember when I started trying to fly helicopters in the sim, it was a nightmare. And not just this sim, but any sim. Where are my runway numbers? Why are they not here? And so, it was a nightmare, and I did it through trial and error. I didn't actually do it through learning. It wasn't until recently that I actually tried doing it the right way. And now I will say, to anyone who wants to say, that's bogus, helicopters don't take off and land on runways, and they don't taxi down taxiways. So it all depends on the airport. It all depends on where you are and where you're going. And if you want to say, no, that's not true, okay, so I'll tell you what. I'll give you two separate occasions. So, since Pony is ex-military, there was two occasions. There was one time where he saw a Huey come in, and it had to taxi. And it had to come down, it had to land on the runway, and it had to taxi. So it had to land on the runway, taxi down the runway, taxi down the taxiways, taxi to parking, to its parking spot. And then it could stop. Just as if it was any old airplane that would come into the base. Now, are there exceptions to that rule? Yes, there are exceptions to that rule. There was another time where Pony saw a CH-47 literally just land pretty much vertically. All of a sudden there was nothing there, and we knew where it was landing, and doesn't matter what I was doing. That's not important. But literally, you just heard it, and then plop, there it was in front of you. No taxiing, no nothing. So that's 34 right. So we were 34 left. So airports will say, and the sim will say, you have to taxi in. Just as if you were an airplane. So there's the difference between a helipad and a runway. Now, on a helipad, of course, it's the same thing with the wind. You want to know what direction the wind's in. All of that helps. Oh, look, the Osprey's there, too. So, depending on what the air traffic controller says to you on where you are, that's what you do. So, let's just do that really quick. And you're saying, but how are you spinning that around? Well, okay, so let's do that. Let's show you how to spin it around. So let's just say the air traffic controller said, blah, 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 Derpy Pony plane, you're clear to land runway 36 left, which is going to be this one. Well, I'm not facing 36 left, so I would, circle the airport. And then I would come in, and unlike a airplane and a helicopter, when I start reducing my speed, and I start bringing the speed down, I can rotate the helicopter. And it's going to lose altitude when I rotate, but I can just take my rudder pedal, and if I want to go right, I just rotate it right until I have it pretty much where I want it, and then I let go. And you say, well, can you do that? Yeah, and you can do it left, too. You can say, well, you want to go left. So I'm going to give it I'm going to pull up on the collective. And in my case, that's giving it throttle. And I want to rotate it left. So it's roughly 180 degrees the other way, which was like, what, 17 or something? Right. Okay, so there we are, 16, 17. right? 360, yeah, something like that. 18, whatever. So that's how you would rotate it 180 degrees. You would just take your pedal and you'd give it a little less throttle and you'd rotate it. Just like that. Until you have it roughly where you want it. And now you're facing the runway. And so you say, well, I want to land. Okay. So we said what? We're going to land on like 36 left. Well, that's 36 left. So we're going to start coming in. And we're going to cut back on the throttle. And I could play with the trim, but I'm actually going to play with my rudder pedals and my stick to try and keep it kind of level. And I know it's going to shimmy me to the left or the right, but I just kind of want to come in, and I feel like I'm going too fast, and I forget what this maneuver is called, but helicopters can actually land like this, where you come in and you don't actually come to a full stop, you like skid forward. So that is one way to land, and I've watched actual pilots do it. So you can do that. I forget what the maneuver is called. Forgive me. I'm a sim pilot, not an actual life pilot. So that's one way to do it. The other way, again, and this is why it's good to practice on a runway, is if I'm coming up and I'm just going to practice on the runway. Whoa, the trim's off. See, the trim's off. That's why it leaned in one direction. So I bumped the trim. Would be, as you're coming in for your landing, and again, I'm using my rudder pedals, not really my trim. I just gently, like I said, we want to baby it. And we have this whole bottom window to baby it. And we just give it a little bit of fuel as it starts to sink so we don't totally clunk it. And this is where the practice comes in, where I said you got to do your bunny hops. You got to do your baby hops. Because if you do it too aggressively, you'll just bounce the helicopter upside down. So remember what I said when you want to, in the previous video, you want to practice your hops. And you want to just give it a little bit of throttle. So let's just go to the end of the runway, turn around. Right, throttle up. And I'm actually going to bump the trim a little bit as I throttle up so that it doesn't lean. There we go. And now it's not leaning. It's leaning in the other direction, which is fine. And I give it some throttle as I nose down. And I have no intention of landing on this runway. And I'm going to do my best by giving it throttle just like I would with, say, a 172. And you're saying, well, you're leaning. Well, if I trim it too much, it's going to pull. So you can actually trim it, give it throttle, trim it, and see it's going to pull to one side. Then you can trim it. So you actually kind of gotta fight with it. Keep giving it more gas, or keep pulling up on the collective, and then you'd increase the throttle, and you would eventually just go straight. You can also do that by giving it a little bit of rudder and adjusting the trim. And you're saying, well, you're tilting it, Pony. You're a horrible helicopter pilot. I'm not the best, but I can get it up off the ground and fly it around. And that's all I'm trying to teach you guys how to do. For you to perfect your skills in flying helicopters, that's up to you. But you've got to learn the basics. You've got to learn the basics of flight before you can get all fancy pants and perfect it. So it's just like, well, if you have kids, if you've ever had kids or you've ever had family that's have kids, everyone's got to walk before they learn how to run. And you've got to crawl before you learn how to walk. And when you learn how to walk, you fall down. Well, it's the same thing for flying, especially with helicopters. You've got to learn some of the basics of just takeoff and landing before you can do anything else. So here I am, and I'm actually coming in horrible. You don't want to do this. I'm just doing this as I talk. And so let's fix the trim because the trim's off. That's why it's tilting, see? So this is actually the purpose of the trim. I'm exaggerating on purpose. As I use my rudder pedals to level it out a little bit, you see the trim's off. The nose, if I try and put the stick center, the nose is going to come up too high. So I'm going to trim it down. Trim it down, trim it down, trim it down, trim it to the left, trim it down, trim it back to the right. And this is why you would use all that lateral trim and everything, so that you could basically end up kind of hovering. Ta-da! But that'll be for another lesson. So that's pretty much it. I don't want the lesson to run too long because I don't want people to be like, I'm not watching another 45-minute video from Pony about how to fly or how to do whatever. No, you guys can enjoy my half an hour, 40-minute videos that aren't flight lessons another time. So that's pretty much it, everybody. That's pretty much your basics. If you're using my setup and you're using the stick and throttle like the way I am, then you'll be able to do exactly what I just did. And you see, as my airspeed goes down, as my feet are on the rudder, it wants to rotate. It wants to auto-rotate. Blue Thunder, that was a good movie. So I basically just did some basics of rotation there. As the speed decreased, the helicopter let me use the rudder pedals to rotate it, instead of having to use my nose to turn, because when we do an actual flying video outside of this, you'll see that when you fly a helicopter, you don't always necessarily use the rudder pedals to turn. You fly it kind of like an airplane. So we're going to come in, and we're on a different runway. We're on the shorter runway. We're on right, so we're on 18 right, and I'm going to bring or 16 left, sorry. I'm going to bring the throttle down to almost 0. As I come in, it's going to drop my altitude, and then I'm going to give it some more throttle as I come in, because I'm thinking of it like a giant balloon. I want to buffer my landing. I want to give it a little bit more, and that's not a bad landing. So I will give you guys that to practice for right now. And just like I taxied on the runway, you guys should taxi off the runway, and you should taxi straight forward, not to the side. So just like you would in like a Cessna or a Bonanza, a Beechcraft, whatever you prefer, whatever kind of helicopter, whatever kind of fixed-wing airplane you prefer, I want you to just try and taxi. After you land, I want you to try and taxi to parking. Now that is going to be fun. See how long you can taxi like that without hitting the ground all the way to parking, by using some of the basic techniques that I was teaching you about rotating with your pedals and trying to stay on the runway. Now, here's the other thing before I let you go, and I'm doing that on purpose because I'm checking my height. Before I let you go, I want you to try this. I want you to take off and land. I want you to try rotating on an airport, on a runway. Turn off live player mode so you don't frustrate other people. And just practice it. Practice it, practice it, practice it until you get better at it. And I will say again, if anyone's doing this in VR, and I can't record my videos in VR, the quality is garbage. Till I can figure out how to solve that, which I can't with my new headset. Sorry, every pony. We have to do it this way. Flying with helicopters in VR is so much easier. So I'm down here, I'm taxiing, see I'm losing altitude. I might not do this perfectly either, and then I'm going to use my rudder pedal, give it a little bit of throttle, use my rudder pedal, and gently turn in the direction I want to go without dragging the skids on the ground or the taxiway. Oh, look! He's happy to see us. There's an airplane that's like, I just couldn't wait. Oh, you know what that is? That's one of those little, those boat planes, whatever it's called. The little boat plane. It's so happy to see us. I can't remember the name of it. It's like, it's whatever that thing is. You can write that in the comments. But look, it's happy to see us. It's like, you learned how to rotate a helicopter today. Look, I can fly on my back and spin in circles. Aren't I awesome? Well, but you're not in a helicopter, so you shouldn't be doing that. Anyhow, what did I say? Taxiing into parking. Right, so then we want to taxi into parking, and this guy's just staring in amazement. He's like, what? So I want you to try that. And we're way too high. I lost my train of thought. Sorry, squirrel. And I want you to gently taxi into parking without being as high as I was when I saw the little, whatever, I forgot that plane's name. And then just gently bring her down and park her. And then this would be dropping the collective all the way down, which for me is bringing the throttle all the way down, or cutting the throttle. And there I am. And there's the little, what was that thing called again? I don't fly it anymore. Anyhow, it's so happy to see us. And that's what happens if you practice rotating the wrong way. You'll rotate upside down. So there you go. I know this is a little bit longer of a tutorial, but I want you guys to try and practice some of those basic techniques, seeing as how there's no helicopter lessons. See, we're rotating around the helicopter until we make you sick. So there we go. And I just want to say, if you guys like what you saw, feel free to like, subscribe, and share my videos. I'm always welcome for comments, as long as they're comments. And I just wanted to say to everybody, thank you for watching Derp Your Hooves, and I look forward to seeing you guys in the skies.